For 36 years, I built my life around one goal, making sure my son never had to struggle the way I did. I worked before sunrise. I came home long after dark. I missed birthdays, school plays, vacations, moments I can never get back. But every sacrifice had a purpose. I was building something solid. Something lasting. Yes, something my son could inherit and be proud of one day. And then, in less than 1 minute, he erased it all. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 66 years old, and I founded one of the most reliable mid-sized construction firms in northern Illinois. I started with a single loan, a used truck, and hands that were more often blistered than rested. Brick by brick, contract by contract, I turned that company into a legacy I believed would one day belong to my only child, Evan. The day Evan got married was supposed to be the happiest chapter of my life. The wedding took place at a luxury hotel overlooking the river. Everything about it was elegant. Too elegant, if I'm being honest. Evan's future father-in-law, Richard Collins, a successful resort developer, had insisted on paying for the entire event. He framed it as tradition. I accepted graciously, believing there would be other ways to show my love and support. I even had a gift waiting, something meaningful. Something Evan could build a future on. But that night, none of it mattered. The ceremony was beautiful. When I saw Evan standing at the altar, I didn't see a grown man in a tailored suit. I saw the little boy who used to sit in my truck, wearing a plastic hard hat, asking endless questions about cranes and blueprints. I should have known better than to relax. At the reception, the music softened. Glasses clinked. Evan stood to give his thank you speech. At first, everything felt normal. He thanked friends. He thanked guests. Then he raised his glass toward Richard. I want to thank the man who made this entire day possible, Evan said proudly. My father-in-law? People smiled. I did too, at first. He's shown me what real support looks like. Evan continued. What generosity really means. He paid for everything. Every detail. My smile faded. Then came the pause. Evan glanced across the room. Straight at me. Some people, he said slowly, didn't contribute anything at all. Not even a flower. The room went silent. I felt like the air had been ripped from my chest. Not a flower? That was how he chose to describe 36 years of sacrifice. Applause followed. Awkward, scattered, uncomfortable. I stayed seated, frozen, while strangers avoided my eyes, and pity replaced respect. Richard looked genuinely shocked. My ex-husband stared at the floor. I don't remember leaving the venue. I only remember driving home alone. My hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. That night, a single thought kept repeating in my mind. If my son believes I gave him nothing, then nothing is exactly what he'll receive. I didn't sleep. Before dawn, I walked into my home office, the room where every major decision of my adult life had been made. The walls were lined with photographs. My first building, my first crew. Evan as a child standing on a job site beside me. And then I saw the folder. The one I had never planned to open. Inside were documents prepared years earlier by my attorney. Contingency plans, ownership records, and an acquisition offer I had once rejected because I believed my son would take over the company someday. I ran my fingers over the papers, my heart pounding. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for decades. What if my life's work was never meant to be his reward? At 7:12 a.m., my phone rang. It was Evan. I let it go to voicemail. Then, it rang again, and again. By the time the sun fully rose, I had already made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. But Evan had no idea. Not yet. In the next part, I make one phone call that sets everything in motion. And when my lawyer confirms a single legal detail, I realize just how much power I still hold. By mid-morning, my phone had become impossible to ignore. Evan had called 9 times. My ex-husband twice. Unknown numbers, no doubt from his new in-laws, kept flashing across the screen. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I poured myself a cup of black coffee and did something I hadn't done in years. I put myself first. At exactly 8:30 a.m., I dialed the number of Victor Hale, my attorney of nearly 2 decades. Victor had handled everything, from land purchases to labor disputes, and he knew my business inside and out. "Laura," he said warmly, "how was the wedding?" I didn't waste time. "Victor," I replied, steady but firm, "I need to know if the acquisition offer from North Shore Development is still valid." Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. "Technically, yes," he said carefully. "They checked in months ago. Why?" "Because I'm ready to reconsider." Another pause. "Laura," he said slowly, "this is a major decision. You rejected that offer for a reason." "Yes," I said, "and that reason no longer exists." I briefly explained what had happened at the wedding. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Victor understood immediately. "That must have been devastating," he said quietly. "But before we go any further, let me confirm something important." I already knew what he was going to say, but hearing it out loud changed everything. "Laura, you are the sole legal owner of Bennett Construction. Evan has never held shares, voting rights, or contractual entitlement. The same applies to the lake property. It was intended as a gift, but it remains legally yours." I closed my eyes. 36 years of work. And somehow, without realizing it, I had protected myself. "So," I said, "I can sell both?" "Yes," Victor replied, "immediately." That was the moment something inside me hardened. Not with anger, but with clarity. "Then let's proceed." Within the hour, Victor contacted North Shore Development. Their interest hadn't faded. In fact, it had grown. The market had shifted. My company's reputation had only strengthened. By noon, we were discussing updated numbers. The revised offer was higher than before. Much higher. While Victor handled the negotiations, I did something else Evan would never expect. I reviewed the property documents for the lake condo. That condo had been my gift to him, a quiet one. No applause, no speeches. Just a foundation for his future. And yet, standing in that ballroom, he claimed I hadn't even given him a flower. I smiled bitterly. By early afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text message. Evan, Mom, please call me. This is getting out of control. I didn't reply. At 3:00 p.m., Victor confirmed the meeting with North Shore's CEO for the following morning. The sale could move fast. Shockingly fast. That night, I slept better than I had since the wedding. The next morning, I dressed the way I used to for major negotiations. Navy suit, pearl earrings, hair neatly pulled back. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I needed to remind myself who I was. Not just a mother, a builder. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. The executives were professional, efficient, and respectful. They praised my leadership, my long-term vision, my reputation for integrity. Not once did they ask about Evan. When the final number was placed in front of me, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but from disbelief. This was the value of my life's work. And for years I had been willing to hand it over without question. I signed the preliminary agreement. As I stood to leave, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a voicemail from Evan. His voice cracked. Mom, people are saying you're selling the company. Please tell me that's not true. I listened once. Then I deleted it. On the drive home, a strange grief washed over me. Not regret, but mourning. Not for what I had lost, but for what I had believed. I had believed love meant endless giving. I had believed silence was strength. I had believed my sacrifices would be understood without being acknowledged. I was wrong. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had already made the second decision, the one that would hurt Evan far more than losing the company. I picked up the phone and called the real estate agent handling the lake property. List it, I said. There was a pause. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I replied. Very sure. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, my doorbell rang. I didn't have to look to know who it was. In the next part, Evan shows up at my house demanding answers. And when I tell him exactly what I've done, his reaction changes our relationship forever. I opened the door knowing exactly what I'd find. Evan stood on my porch like someone who hadn't slept in days. His suit was gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes and restless hands. Behind him stood Maya, his wife, her eyes red and her posture cautious, as if she already sensed this conversation would leave scars. Mom, Evan said immediately, stepping forward. We need to talk. I didn't step aside. We are talking, I replied calmly. Right here. His jaw tightened. Is it true? Did you really sell the company? I signed the preliminary agreement yesterday, I said. The final paperwork will be completed this week. The color drained from his face. That company was mine, he said, his voice rising. You told me my entire life it would be mine. I told you it would be yours someday, I corrected. I never said it was guaranteed. Maya reached for his arm. Laura, please. Evan didn't mean what he said at the wedding. He was nervous. There was pressure. My father. Stop, I said, holding up my hand. This isn't about your father. This is about my son. Evan stepped inside without waiting for permission. He paced the living room like a trapped animal, his voice cracking between anger and panic. You humiliated me, he said. People are talking. My colleagues. My in-laws. Everyone thinks I've lost everything overnight. I met his eyes. You humiliated me first. Silence fell hard between us. For 36 years, I continued. I showed my love quietly. I didn't make speeches. I didn't demand gratitude. I worked. I sacrificed. And when you had a chance, to acknowledge that, you chose to erase me. That's not fair, he said desperately. I thanked Richard because he paid for the wedding. And I paid for your entire life, I replied. Yet somehow, that didn't deserve a single sentence. Maya's voice shook. Laura, he regrets it. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. He keeps saying he made a mistake. I don't doubt that, I said softly. But regret isn't the same as understanding. Evan dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. What am I supposed to do now? He whispered. The company was my future. The condo. I sold that too. He looked up sharply. What? The lake property is under contract, I said. The buyers move in next week. Maya gasped. Evan stared at me like I was a stranger. Ha! You can't do this, he said hoarsely. That was our home. It was my property, I corrected. Just like the company. You're punishing me, he said bitterly. No, I said. I'm teaching you something I failed to teach before. He stood abruptly. You're destroying my life over a speech. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. No, Evan. You built your life assuming my sacrifices were automatic. You never asked what it cost me. You never wondered what would happen if I stopped giving. Maya wiped her tears. Laura, he is your son. Yes, I said. And that's exactly why this matters. Evan's anger finally collapsed into something raw and unfamiliar. Fear. I don't know how to do this without you, he admitted. My heart tightened, but I didn't look away. I did it without anyone, I said. I borrowed money I didn't have. I worked jobs no one respected. I failed more times than I can count. And I never blamed my parents when it was hard. So what? He asked. You're just cutting me off forever. I shook my head. No, I'm cutting off entitlement. I walked to the door and opened it. This conversation is over, I said. I wish you well, truly. But you're going to build whatever comes next on your own. Evan didn't move at first. Then slowly, he nodded. Not in agreement, but in resignation. As they stepped outside, he turned back one last time. You'll regret this, he said quietly. I held his gaze. Maybe, I replied. but not as much as I'd regret teaching you that disrespect has no consequences. They drove away without another word. That night, alone in my house, I finally let myself cry. Not because I felt weak, but because I felt human. I had lost the version of my son I thought I knew. But somewhere deep inside, I sensed something else had begun. A reckoning. And Evan was about to face the world without my name protecting him. In the next part, months later, I receive a message from Evan that I never expected. And what I learn about his new life forces me to question whether my decision truly changed him or broke him. 3 months passed without a word from Evan. At first, the silence felt unbearable. Every morning I reached for my phone out of habit, half expecting his name to appear. It never did. Slowly, painfully, I adjusted. I sold my house. I downsized my life. I booked a one-way flight to Arizona. For the first time since my 20s, my days were not measured by deadlines, contracts, or responsibility for someone else's future. I woke up when my body told me to. I drank coffee on a quiet patio. I let myself exist without constantly fixing, providing, or rescuing. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone vibrated. Evan. I stared at the screen for a full minute before opening the message. Mom, I don't know if you'll want to hear from me. But I need you to know something. I finally understand. My heart pounded as I kept reading. I've been working for a small construction firm outside the city. Entry-level pay. Long hours. No special treatment. They don't care who my parents are, because they don't know. I set the phone down, took a breath, then picked it back up. The first few weeks were brutal, he continued. I thought I was overqualified. I wasn't. I didn't know half of what I thought I did. The guys on site don't sugarcoat anything. I've been yelled at, corrected, and humbled more times than I can count. I closed my eyes. This was the first time Evan had ever admitted weakness without blaming someone else. I come home exhausted every night, he wrote. But for the first time, I know exactly what you went through. I see it now, and I'm ashamed it took losing everything to understand it. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't reply right away. I needed time. Not to punish him, but to listen to myself. To be sure this wasn't fear talking, or regret, or loneliness. A week later, another message arrived. This one from Maya. Lara, I just want to say thank you. I didn't understand your decision at first. I thought it was cruel. Now I see what it did. Evan is different. Quieter. More grounded. He doesn't expect the world to bend anymore. He works for what he earns. That message stayed with me. Because change doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up in consistency. Over the next 2 months, Evan sent occasional updates. Never demands. Never requests. Just observations. He talked about learning to read real-world budgets. About mistakes that cost time and money. About respecting workers who knew more than he did. Then, one morning, a final message arrived. Mom, I don't want anything from you. Not money. Well, William Chad, not property, not opportunities. I just want to know if we can talk. Even once. I stared out at the desert horizon for a long time. Then I typed back, "Come see me." When Evan arrived 2 weeks later, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner, tired, different in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Present, grounded, honest. We sat across from each other in silence before he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for the speech. For who I was before it." I nodded. "That matters more." "I don't expect forgiveness," he added quickly. "And I don't expect help. I just needed you to know that losing everything forced me to meet myself. And I didn't like what I saw." I studied him carefully. For the first time, his words weren't about what he'd lost, but about what he'd learned. "Tell me something," I said. "If I had forgiven you immediately, would this version of you exist?" He shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I would have gone right back to taking you for granted." We talked for hours, not as a provider and a dependent, but as two adults rebuilding something fragile. Before he left, Evan turned to me. "I don't know what our future looks like," he said, "but I know I want to earn my place in it." I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because something real had finally begun. In the final part, I make a decision that surprises Evan and myself, one that proves forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and love doesn't mean giving everything away. Evan left Arizona quietly the next morning. No promises, no expectations, just a hug that felt earned, not demanded. For weeks after his visit, I thought about what forgiveness really meant. Not the version people talk about so easily, but the kind that requires restraint. The kind that doesn't erase consequences just to ease discomfort. I had forgiven Evan as a mother. But as a woman who had spent her life building something from nothing, I wasn't willing to repeat the same mistake twice. 3 months later, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize at first. Greenspan Projects, LLC. ... It was Evan. He had helped launch a small, sustainable renovation startup with 2 senior contractors from his firm. No family funding. No favors. Just pooled savings, long hours, and a risky lease on a modest office. The email wasn't asking for money. He was asking for advice. Not introductions. Not capital. Just my opinion on a proposal they were considering, and whether I thought the numbers made sense. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I smiled. We scheduled a video call. For the first time in my life, Evan spoke to me not as my son waiting for approval, but as a professional seeking perspective. He walked me through projections, risks, and timelines. He listened when I challenged assumptions. He took notes. When the call ended, he said something that stayed with me. "Whether this works or not," he said, "I know it's mine." That was when I knew. 6 months later, I made a decision I hadn't planned, but one that felt right. I created a small private investment fund. Nothing extravagant. A fraction of what I had earned from selling my company. The rules were simple. No family handouts. No controlling shares. No emotional leverage. Only merit-based investment. Evan's company qualified. Barely. I didn't tell him right away. Instead, I asked him to pitch. Formally. Professionally. Like any other founder. When he finished, I asked a single question. If I say no, I said, what happens? He didn't hesitate. Then we keep going, he replied. We adjust. We survive. We learn. That answer mattered more than the pitch. I invested, not as his mother, but as a minority partner. No board control. No safety net. Just belief, backed by boundaries. When I told him, Evan didn't cry. He didn't hug me. He simply nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me this way." That was the moment I truly got my son back. Not the entitled boy who stood in a ballroom chasing approval, but the man who finally understood the weight of what he'd been given, and what it meant to earn something himself. Today, our relationship is different. Stronger. Quieter. Built on respect instead of obligation. And as for me, I wake up each morning in a home chosen by freedom, not responsibility. I mentor when I want to. I invest carefully. I live fully. I didn't lose my son. I lost the illusion that love means endless sacrifice without accountability. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a parent can give is not an inheritance, but the courage to let go. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give isn't money, property, or protection. It's letting their child face life without a safety net, so they finally learn how to stand.